This is an 80% furnace, this is a 90% furnace, and I'm about to show you why all these parts added up could cost $1,000 to replace. All right, today I have another parts video, but this isn't like any other parts video that we've done before. This is on two furnaces that are very similar, but completely different, and we're gonna show you how right now. All right, just a little description of each of these furnaces. What we have right here is an 80% downflow. That 80% actually stands for the efficiency of the unit. So you can always think of that as, if you spend $1 for gas, you're gonna get 80 cents worth of heat out of this unit. To whereas this one on my left is a 90% upflow furnace, and for every $1 you spend, you're gonna get 90 cents worth of heat out of it. So that's a good point of how the efficiency works on these. Like I said before, this one is a upflow, meaning that the air it's actually made to go in an upflow position. It can also go horizontal. And this one is a downflow, and what that means is the airflow is going downflow. So if you have any floor ducts, this would be the unit for you. If you have ducts that are in your attic, this would be the unit for you. So that's a little difference there. They can come in either way, but we really want to show each different parts that they have the same and the parts that make them different. So let's go ahead and start tearing these down and see what all the parts in these are. All right, we got everything disassembled, and we're gonna start by comparing each part from an 80%er to a 90%er. And I think you'll see there's not that much difference. A couple parts have a little bit difference, but we'll go over that, and we'll go over pricing too. First thing we got is our condensate for our furnace. Now, being a 90%er, this is the one thing you will not find on an 80%er. This is a condensating trap. We have to have this. With the high efficiency, it condensates. That's one of the things that they do, and they've built all kinds of special things to go with that unit to make it possible. We'll see one later, but this is one that you have to have on it that you will not see on an 80%er. Now, these don't usually have a problem, but every once in a while you will have to replace them. When we do replace them, you're looking at about $356 to replace. We kind of have to contact the manufacturer, make sure, so that price can be subject to manufacturer, but that's a good run of the mill. That pricing does include all labor to install, any of our overhead, all the good stuff that goes with it. Next, we're gonna do kind of a twofer here. I have a door switch first, and both of these have door switches, and as you can see, both of them are the identical door switch. Door switches can be all kinds of different models. Linux has been using these for a long time, so that's pretty standard. They don't usually go out, but when they do, a lot of people like to bypass them. I don't. It's a safety feature. I want to make sure any homeowner that might try to work on their unit will do it in a safe way, and this is how the manufacturer does that. And so to replace these, if you did need to have one replaced, you're looking at about $209. That's pretty standard. There's no real deviation price. Obviously, if you see this 3 years from now, that could change a little bit, but that's the price. Out the door, installed, warranty, all our good stuff that we add on with it. As you can see, these actually have the identical same board, which makes it really nice for manufacturing, and it means they'll be available a lot longer. So control boards have come a long way. I love control boards. Before we used to use relays. We couldn't do as much with them. You couldn't have the efficiency that you have nowadays without a control board. It has major safety mechanisms all built in, so they are a must, and great to see that we're having one product have the same board as another. That means I have more chance of having it on my truck. Manufacturer has a chance of having it in their store, and it usually cuts down on cost too. But looking at a control board, you're going to look at about $770 for the cost for that control board. Now that can vary. Now that would be pretty much what these would be. Now any kind of unit's always different. You could have a unit that has a board that it cost us, $700 alone for the board. Not too often that happens, but it does. So we would definitely have to price those things out. But for the most part, you're going to get out at $770 for install. We're going to professionally check everything, make sure that it's running and everything's up to spec too during that time. So that's what I got to say about these parts. Next, you'll see we have a theme going. Lots of parts the same. It's amazing that Just a few little things will make that more efficient, but these are transformers. You're going to find them on almost every residential unit out there. They have different sizes and different factors to them. Not too many problems that we find. Usually when there's a problem with this transformer, it's because we actually have a short. Now, if you saw my last part, it actually has a fuse built in. Most of them nowadays have fuses. It did not happen that way back in the day. I bet they replaced quite a few of these, but for how expensive these are, a fuse is a lot cheaper. Now, what we do see with these, like I said, is shorts, and every once in a while that fuse doesn't protect it. It does happen, or you could have a bad transformer. But I like to see these last, life of the unit, but it's always possible. When we're looking at pricing on these, we're looking at about $330. It can vary based on how big of a transformer you get, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. And that's going to cover your labor, overhead, anything, our truck cost. So there's a lot built into it. And that's what I got to say about this part. Next, we got the blower assembly. We can talk about the motors and we can talk about the wheel. I don't have a price for the assembly. Don't usually have a problem with that. If you're going to have a problem, you're usually going to have a problem with the motor, or it is possible that a wheel will come loose, especially if you have something like high static or something that's causing that motor not to operate like it's supposed to. Could damage that wheel. On those motors, these are actually ECM motors, which is kind of nice. And like I said before, they're both the same motor, which makes it kind of nice. They don't have capacitors like you usually see on most of your PSC motors that majority of people have in their house nowadays. Mandates have actually said you have to use ECM motors on all indoor units, with exception, but for the most part we're going to see ECM motors in the Southwest because of regulations. They're great motors. The only problem they have is they are a little bit more expensive, but they are coming down in price, and they've significantly dropped in price. But for replacement of a blower motor, you're going to be looking at about $770. Now, I would have to actually look up these motors because they could be a little bit more. I wouldn't think they'd be too much more than that. We've seen some for like $850 to $900, but I have seen some what we call constant CFM ones be up in the $1,000 range. So realize that can vary quite a bit based on what kind of motor you have. And then on the wheel, we do see them fall apart. That's never fun when they do. They kind of give you warning signs sometimes, which I always call it a slinky sound. If you're starting to see that, any kind of noise like that, I definitely give us a call, have us check out your unit, especially if you haven't had it maintenance in a while. We'd be happy to come out and do a maintenance and do all that good stuff. Make sure your blower wheel's clean, because that's another factor. A lot of dirt built up on that can mess up the balance of that motor. This actual blower wheel, we were talking about blower wheels coming apart. One reason that they can go off is because they aren't balanced. And sometimes these can shift, kind of like this one. We're actually rubbing on the housing, but sometimes even a little bit off. If it's moving, it's not in balance. We want to make sure that's perfectly balanced, and that can throw it off. Just always make sure that somebody professional is looking at your unit to make sure it's in manufacturer specs. Wheel, if you do need to replace it, it's going to be about $640, depending on brand, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Both of these parts have everything built into them: profit, overhead, labor, and the cost of the materials. That's what I got to say about this assembly. Next, we have gas valves. And this is one difference we do have on these. They are very similar. In fact, they are both Residio, which is formerly Honeywell. Great brand. I love that they use these. Never had too much problems with a Honeywell gas valve. This one is going to be your 90%, and this one's going to be your 80%. Needless to say, they are almost identical, minus this one has another port where it's reading pressure in the actual cabinet to judge how much gas it wants to give. That is a big difference. Makes it a little bit more of a pain whenever we got to check them for gas pressures and all that good stuff. But overall, both of these, like them. Single stage. Maybe if they were two stage, they'd be a little bit better. You get a little bit more efficiency, but gas is king, like I always say. When you're looking at replacing these, you're looking at about $773 for either one of these. There's not really a difference in the price. The port doesn't make any difference. That includes all of your labor, all your overhead, all the fun stuff we like to pay for too. Now we got our fun igniter. So much better than back in the day. No pilots anymore. I don't think there's been a unit with a pilot for ages with exception. Comment down below if you know of one. I can't think of one off a hand, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that will prove me wrong. So these are great because you don't have to light a pilot. You don't have to have gas running all the time. It's only running gas when you call for the unit. So the only negative thing about these is they do wear out. They're in high temperature. So these are going to be the parts that wear out some of the fastest because of the conditions that they're in. They do last quite a bit. You can usually get about 10 years out of these easy. If you don't get 10 years, you kind of wonder what was the problem. There might be something else that you want to look at. We ohm these out and check them anytime we come to there, so we can know beforehand if there's going to be a problem down the line. We can kind of catch those things ahead of time. Both of these are the almost identical part, so there's not going to be a difference in any kind of part. Most of these igniters all cost the same. When you're looking at the cost for these, you're looking at about $327. That's going to be pretty much what it is, even if it's an aftermarket or OEM. They don't really change too much on price. Aftermarket ones are just as good as the OEM in my opinion, and that's what we usually put on if it's not under warranty. All right, so these are going to be your limits. Some of these ones right here are actually rollout limits, and you'll see they're resettable because if they have a rollout, they want somebody to look at it, and that's the reason they do that. This is actually a high limit, and this limit resets. So if your heat gets too high, it'll kick it off, run the fan for a while, so it cools down that heat exchanger, and then it'll allow you to go back to business once it reaches its points. Same thing on these. This is for the 80%er. This is your high limit, and then this is going to be your rollout. This one only has one rollout, whereas this one has two. Lots of different little safety switches, very important switches. There are people that bypass these. Do not bypass them. It is for your safety of your family. And trust me, it is not fun when something like this is bypassed. Now, I will say this has actually one more limit. It's actually located on the blower motor, just to make sure that being a downflow, your heat rises. They want to make sure it doesn't get too hot up there, and it switches it off as fast as possible before it damages anything. But when you're looking at any of these to replace, you're looking at about $293 each. So whether it be the two rollouts on that one or just one rollout, that's usually what it is per each switch. It includes all labor and all overhead and profit and material. Hey guys, we're about halfway through this video and just wanted to let you know we got a QR code up top here, and you can actually scan that to request service or even get a quote on a new system like a 90%er or an 80%er. We find that customers appreciate us being upfront about our pricing. That's why we do our videos like this, and that's one reason we built a tool. That way you would know beforehand what it would be to replace your unit. We want to make sure that you have the knowledge you need to get any of your work done. So any questions, we always want to be helpful, and we want to make sure we're as transparent as possible. Back to the video. We got pressure switches here. Obviously, you're going to find pressure switches on every furnace nowadays because we all have inducer motors. They're going to actually tell the unit, hey, that inducer's on. You can go ahead and fire off the heat. That's all these are. More safety features. Keep you and your family safe. These are a little bit different. There's not too much difference on the pricing of them. Now, you do have some of these furnaces, especially 90%ers, when you get into two-stage, you can actually run into where you have a dual pressure switch, which can cost a little bit more money. Definitely want to have somebody look at that. But when you're looking at pricing on these, you're going to be looking at about $350. Next, we got flame sensors. Seems like a theme here. Not only do we have identical, I could switch these back and forth and they're the exact same, but another safety feature. Definitely manufacturers want you to be safe in your home. I can tell you that with all kinds of things that the manufacturer has done, one thing they want is you to be safe in your home. And that's why we have these devices. Luckily, this is one you cannot bypass. That's the great thing about it. All it's doing is it takes a little bit of voltage and flame goes across it, and through those ions are going to allow a little bit of voltage to transfer through, and then this is going to go to the board and say, we have flame. If it doesn't have flame, it's going to shut off that gas valve, because obviously we don't want to pour gas anywhere around your house that's not being ignited. That's the most important thing about these. Very important. Biggest problem we ever have on these is, just like the igniter, they are in horrible conditions. High temp. It's not a total burn whenever you're burning those. You do have some impurities that can build up on this, and you'll have just different kind of impurities, soot, all that kind of stuff can build up on these and get them dirty, and then they don't work. We try to clean them whenever we come out there for maintenance, but ultimately when you get to the point where they stop working, you almost need to just go ahead and replace them. If you're going to replace them, you're going to be looking at about $301 to replace this one, or both. If you got both, you could have a 90 and an 80. These are inducer motors. Some people call them draft motors. You can call them either way. I don't mind. Somebody in the comments can tell me how I'm wrong if they want to. I love it. But you can see a big difference here. And this is part of that, making sure that we can have that 90% efficiency off of the 90%er right here. All this is plastic. Even inside, you can see it's plastic. And the reason why is this is a condensating furnace. At this point, we have condensation. We want to make sure that this is protected. And if I had this right here on a 90% furnace, I'd have rust in the, well, if not the first month, at least in the first year, and this thing would just fall apart. So we want to make sure we put the right motor on. This is one part that you're going to have OEM. I can't think of anybody that actually makes aftermarkets for these. I'm sure if you worked really hard and you could find maybe just this motor and take apart this whole assembly if you want to. For me and you as a customer, if I have to take apart this whole assembly to get to that motor, it's going to cost more than replacing the whole assembly. So that's why we like to replace the whole assembly. With that being said, you are going to vary on prices. Obviously, this one's going to cost a little bit more, and this one's going to cost a little bit less. When you're looking at pricing for this, you're looking at about $732 at start. That's definitely something that we want to quote out. Like I said, it's OEM. We got to make sure that we're covering our parts on material that we can be profitable and stay in business for you. So definitely call if you need an inducer changed out. It will be most likely quoted out, unless it's something like a basic 80%er. We kind of know what those prices are. So that's pretty much for that, for the 732 would cost for that. This one would probably be more around the price of about 850 to 900 roughly. So that's what I got to say about these beautiful parts. So these are burners, and more importantly, burner assemblies, however you want to say it. Now, these can get dirty, and a lot of the problems we have with them is dirt. You don't really have too many problems with the actual burner assemblies. The dirt is going to be your biggest problem. So having them cleaned regularly is always going to be helpful and all that good stuff. Ultimately, if you did have to replace these, you're looking at about $712. It's a pretty good rule of thumb. It can vary on manufacturers, but there's not going to be too much variance on pricing. You can clean these. Like I said, that's the biggest problem with these. Cleaning them, it would be the better thing to do. And you can look at a cleaning for about $236. So I'd much rather pay $236, take this apart, make sure it's clean as possible, and get you back up and going. That's what I got to say about these parts. Now for probably the biggest difference, but they both have them, but they are two totally different beasts. We have an 80% heat exchanger and a 90% heat exchanger. And there is a big difference between these two on everything, cost, all that good stuff. You can see that this 80% is, I don't know, it's pretty puny. I mean, there's nothing to it. It's just a bunch of metal. These are a lot lighter than that 90%er. So it hurts my back to lift that thing. They kind of went reverse. We used to have your old natural draft induced furnaces, and their heat exchangers were heavy. Hated taking out all those furnaces from the 80s. I've done quite a few, but with that being said, this was nice because it was nice and light. And if you're going in an attic, oh man, lifting up a furnace with this is so much nicer. Then the manufacturers decided we were getting soft and they built this big old beast. And it is all there. You can see we are just building on the same concepts. Everything started with direct draft having ribbon burners that go down here, and then the flame would just go up. Well, we achieved getting better efficiency by having it go through a tube and having an inducer that pulled some of that air out, at least pulled it through there. And those were actually still not considered positive pressure inducers. After that, they decided, well, we want to get more efficient. So how are we going to get more efficient? We need to have it go through more of a heat exchanger. And so they added this, what we call a secondary heat exchanger, also called a condensating heat exchanger. And that's where all the flues go back here, and then it goes through here again. And then it comes out right here. And we actually have a special, what we call a cold header. It's plastic so that you're not going to rust up anything or any good stuff like that. So amazing technology. I would say the biggest problems that we have with these have to do with maintenance. Maintenance. Seems like we're always pushing maintenance. But it's true. I have had units where unit won't run. It's going off, you know, it's hitting my high limit and stuff like that. And then you pull the blower, and this secondary heat exchanger sits right above or below the blower, whichever. It's right next to the blower, sits right here. So that blower is blowing right here. And before it goes in the coil, it goes into this light coil. So this coil right here, secondary heat exchanger, can get dirt built up on it. Changing your filter is king with these. You just got to make sure your filter is always changed, because not only is it going to build up on your blower wheel, which we see quite a bit, and they say 1/10 of an inch of dust can block about 20% of your airflow, which is not good. But if it gets past that blower, it could stick to this. And then what are we going to do? No airflow. We're going to go off on high limits, all those fun stuff. So anytime you have a 90%er, I definitely highly suggest you change your filters very regularly. Speaking of, I need to change my filters. Like, a good thing I have this job. I don't think I'd ever change my filters if I didn't. But when we go from there, another thing that we have learned that is a negative about having a 90%er is when you put them in attics. Now, if you have a foamed attic, they're great. In fact, you cannot, unless you do it special, it's really hard to get an 80% because of codes in a foamed attic. But 90%er, no problem. And we can go into that some video if y'all want to comment. We can go into that later. But when we go with an 80%er, one of the things it doesn't do is condensate. And where condensate, we've been dealing with it for years, and we have all the protections. The problem with the 90% furnace, it only has a problem about a week out of the year. And that week is the coldest week of the year, because we get all kinds of situations where drain lines freeze up because we're sending water through somewhere where it's really cold. So with that, that's why we don't suggest putting them in there. Unless you have a 90%er already in your attic, we actually suggest sticking with an 80%er. It just can cause a lot less problems down the line if you're having us out once a year because it's freezing up. Now, lots of people are going to comment, well, you should put heat tape. You should put Armor Flex on all those drain lines. We do. All of ours, if we've ever put them in the attic in the last 5 years, we have all those things. I still have problems. The only one I know that works is mine at my house. But trust me, every cold night, I sit there at night praying that my unit doesn't go off, because I don't want to get in my attic on the coldest night of the year. And I will not put a 90%er in my attic because I don't want to deal with the condensating issues on those cold nights. If it's in a closet, even in a garage, we don't have the problem. For some reason, in an attic, we will get tons of calls, and it's usually February, and I have to go dig somebody out of the snow, and all those fun things that we get to do on that week. But it's usually 1 week out of the year makes a 90%er a living you-know-what. So when you're looking at changing out a heat exchanger, you're going to be looking at upwards of $3,000. Ultimately, I can't give you a good price. everything's going to be with what the manufacturer is going to charge. Not only that, is you want to make sure anybody looking at your unit, if they say you have a problem with the heat exchanger, have them check the warranty. Some of these have 20 years. You know, there's some of these 90%ers that Lennox first started making, they have lifetime warranties on their heat exchangers. So that can cut down the price significantly. You're looking at more like $1,200 for just the labor and overhead and all that good cost just to change them out. That can vary. I hadn't done one in a while. Usually when we get to the point where heat exchanger's going bad, it's usually out of warranty, and that's a pretty big ticket item. Anytime a big ticket item like that comes out, I suggest that you scan that QR code and get you a quote on what a new unit would be, because getting that estimate will give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to need to change out. So if you're looking at spending $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, why would you put that into a unit that's got tons of other parts that needs to probably be changed out too? Definitely look at your options. We are always here to do what the customer wants. We'll give you quotes both ways. We will quote you prices to repair and prices to replace. But when it comes to what I would suggest to somebody, I always suggest on those big ticket items to look at what it would be to replace and see if it fits in your budget. And that's what I got to say about all these parts. All these parts added up could cost $9,000 to replace. So we kind of went over the difference between a 90%er and an 80%er. And so if you're still wondering what's right for your home, well, it kind of comes back to efficiency. We can see that there's not a whole lot of difference in these units. Now, we do have 90%ers that go further than 90%ers. Actually, Lennox has a furnace that will do 99% efficiency. It costs more, it has a lot more parts in it, but there's a difference there. I mean, you're talking about saving 10 cents every dollar you're putting in here by going with a 90 to an 80. So does that make sense to you for efficiency? Are you in a situation where you have in an attic and maybe you don't want to deal with any kind of headaches possibly down the line? 80%er might make more sense for you. All in all, we want to make sure that you're getting the unit that you want. So if you have any questions or any concerns and you live in the Oklahoma City metro area, give us a call. We'd be happy to help you make that decision. Thank you guys. Make sure you comment below and definitely scan that QR code.
Yarbrough